I'm not sure what I was even thinking. That thing hardly ever resembled a human to begin with. The entity that I thought had been a simple corpse began writhing its way up, its skin comparable in appearance to an amalgamation of thousands of tiny, shifting brownish gray cells, while its limbs were strung together by thick, pulsing veins. Its face began morphing, eventually taking on the appearance of a human. Not just a regular person, though. A really good-looking one. It was as if somebody stitched the head of a runway model onto a giant, deformed alien. "What's the level threat on that thing? Pretty weak, right?" I asked Kaz, hoping to hear 1 or 2. That might be a 5 or 6. I cursed under my breath.
"Like moths drawn to a candle,"
the demon model began speaking.
"Humanity goes out of its way to seek pure beauty, disturbing my beautiful slumber in the process. But they don't deserve to bask in the presence of this beauty. The paragon of aesthetics, Kalos, will now exterminate you disgusting mongrels."
We're the disgusting ones? I thought to myself. But before we could actually say anything, he rushed forward, a large, ghastly hand outstretched. One strike from him likely would have scrambled my organs. Luckily, Kaz intercepted him before that could happen, drilling his fist into Kalos's chest. The impact sent him flying into a wall, but also managed to tear apart the skin on Kaz's knuckles in the process. "Ah, dang it," he said, shaking his hand. "What the hell is your body made out of? It doesn't end with you freaks, does it?" Kalos chuckled as he dislodged himself from the wall. There was now a deep hole in his chest, but he didn't seem to mind it too much.
"Lucky you didn't aim for my face,"
he said.
"You scum would have been begging me for death."
He was interrupted by another punch from Kaz, but managed to block it with both arms this time. That one was undoubtedly headed for his face. "Pretty good reflexes," Kaz said. "I love it when they start rambling." Kalos grimaced in anger.
"You're gonna regret being so smug. Subhumans should know their place. I could obliterate you fools right now, but I'll leave the dirty work to Trent."
He spat on the ground in front of us before storming out of the room. I breathed a sigh of relief in response. "Could you have taken him?" I asked out of curiosity. "Maybe," he responded. "But let's not call that lucky. We might have to deal with him later." That whole situation had taken up about 5 minutes. We couldn't afford to waste any more time, immediately darting out of the room right after. "What are we going to do?" I asked him as we ran. "We're going to brave it outside. When we get there, just close your eyes and keep running like hell." From beyond the walls of the school, I could hear a chorus of witch-like shrieks, along with bursts of high-pitched maniacal laughter. Safe to say, my options were pretty crappy. It was either face whatever the hell lay outside, or deal with the mysterious but apparently devastating Judas. I believe they call that going up shit creek without a paddle. Except the water is acid, and the boat is just a rotting horse carcass. As we got closer to one of the exit doors, still blanketed in the purple smoke, mind you, the floors began rumbling below us. Kaz was right. There was no end to this incomprehensible nightmare. A shadow began casting itself from one of adjacent corridors ahead, getting exponentially larger with every second. We skidded to a stop before making contact with whatever the hell was coming. A monstrously sized canine scraped the walls and ceilings as it crashed into our path. I suppose canine would have been the best way to describe the thing. It hardly resembled any earthly creature at all, but it ran on 4 legs and stuck out its tongue a lot. A tongue, covered in additional mouths, lined with spike-like teeth. A tongue dripping fluid that dissolved the floor beneath. Charcoal black fur with red eyes blinking all over. Bones, shaped like saws, located at every joint. 4 larger eyes on its head that jutted outwards, twisting and turning to scope out the environment. I could hear Kaz chuckle in utter disbelief. "There, boy," he muttered. There was also a person riding atop the bizarre beast. He was a pale, skinny, naked fellow with disheveled hair and wild eyes. "My boy's hungry, isn't he?" The psychopath talked to his apparent pet in a manner comparable to the way a suburban mom would talk to her cat. "Look, Brando," he said, pointing towards us with a bony shaking finger. "Walking food." We didn't actually stick around to hear what he said at the end, but I imagine that it would have been something like that. If we were running hard before, we were pushing ourselves to the brink now. Kaz was faster than me, of course, but I didn't lag behind hard enough to warrant him carrying me or something. My daily 5-mile runs weren't for nothing. Eventually, we made it to a stairway, scrambling our way up with no room to spare. Brando's head got stuck in the doorway as it tried to swallow us. I nearly had a heart attack when I turned around, only to see one of its eyes following us up the stairs. Fortunately, Kaz punched it away. When we got up, we were drenched in cold sweat. Kaz took off his mask, which was half broken, revealing a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy likely in his late 20s underneath. Not really what I was expecting, to be honest. He let out what sounded like a frustrated exhale as he ran his hands through his hair. "We've made some mistakes in our lives, haven't we?" "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked up at me, eyes squinted in disbelief. "Look at where the hell we are, where we voluntarily chose to be." At that moment, I had nothing to say in response. We rested for a few moments before entering the corridor ahead of us. We couldn't go back down after all. Brando was still stuck. As soon as I stepped into the hall, I was met with a familiar sight. Room 203. The door was now busted open, along with the surrounding walls. The purple light was as blinding as ever, and I tried my best not to stare too much. From inside, we could hear a cacophony of cries mixed with a deeper, chanting voice. It took me a second to realize that the cries definitely belonged to the remaining schoolchildren, and one of them sounded awfully familiar. "All right," Kaz said. "Just run right past the door, no looking, full speed. We'll find another way out." "But," I began. "The kids, they're—" "Don't think about doing anything stupid," Kaz interrupted me. "There's no guarantee that we'll even get out of here alive. Don't make this crap even more complicated than it is. We were both given tasks that we had no chance of succeeding in. It's not our fault. But now, we need to run." Obviously, he was right. But I didn't want him to be. I rarely tell anybody the true reason why I decided to join law enforcement. It really wasn't for any kind of recognition. Not so I could pretend to be some swashbuckling badass either, no matter how much I lied to myself about it. Certainly not for the pay. It was because I had a strong resolve, spurred on by one fateful incident. Back in my university days, I used to be part of a baseball club. One that held late matches that lasted well into the night. One of those nights, I was walking back to my apartment around 1 a.m. when I heard a cry that was quickly muffled, coming from a sedan parked on the side of the road. As soon as I heard it, I stopped. Now I was no hero. I still don't think I am. Truly nobody special. I was just a simple person with simple ideals, ones that I never had a reason to act on until that night. Before that, I wouldn't have believed that I had it in me. We all fantasize about doing these things, but when the time comes to act, our rationality and self-preservation instincts bar us from doing so. But sometimes, raw passion and idealism manages to override everything. Long story short, I shattered the sedan's tinted windows with my bat before nearly bludgeoning a human trafficker's head in. I'm sure it was something that the 13-year-old girl being bound and gagged in the back couldn't have forgotten. But hey, it was hard for me to stop myself, and she'd already seen far worse. Afterwards, the girls' parents hugged me whilst bawling their eyes out. That was the first time in my life I felt genuinely fulfilled with myself. It was a good thing that I didn't kill the guy as well. They managed to interrogate the names of other traffickers involved and locations where the kidnapped were being held out of them. I enrolled in the police academy a year later after I'd graduated college. Those memories flooded back into my mind at a rapid pace, a reminder of my resolve, the real reason why I was in this situation in the first place. It was true that I'd lost my passion over the stagnant years, but all it took was one push to bring it all back. At that point, I was completely unarmed, save for 2 stun grenades and the taser on my belt. But that didn't stop me from rushing right in. Never said I was smart, did I? Kaz cursed me from behind, running to catch up. Obviously, I had no idea what to expect upon entering that room, but there was only one detail that I needed to know. There were kids in need of help. My eyes stung as the purple light invaded my senses, but despite how much it hurt, I felt oddly drawn to them, as if whatever was emitting the glow was just begging me to look. But that was obviously a bad idea, so I forced myself to stare ahead, at the rows of blindfolded kids tied to their seats. There was also a person at the front of the room, where the teacher would have stood whilst giving a lecture. They were wearing a large, dark cloak and had bone-like fingers that were constantly twitching, forming consecutive, obscure symbols. On top of that, they were chanting in a voice that was deep, fast, and gravelly, devoid of any emotion at all. Obviously, the mastermind behind the whole ritual thing. I was on an adrenaline high, so I did the best thing I could think of at the moment. I clocked the person straight in the jaw. They slumped over and their hood came off, revealing a pale, borderline emaciated woman with symbols and scars etched throughout her face. I always told myself that I was going to be that guy who'd never hit a woman in his life. But screw it. I turned around to face the kids. A few of them seemed aware of what was going on, but most of them seemed completely out of it. For whatever reason, I thought that taking off their blindfolds was going to be a good idea, but that couldn't have been farther from the truth. I ran to the kid nearest me and ripped off the thin piece of cloth wrapped around his head. For the first few seconds, his terrified eyes were on me, and then they drifted to the front of the room, fixating on the glow. In an instant, his eyes turned black and his teeth grew sharp and large. He launched his head towards me, biting my forearm in the process. I reeled from the pain, but managed to kick him off before he could go for a follow-up mouthful. But the possessed kid was relentless, as if his life had suddenly been reduced to serving a singular goal, to inflict as much carnage as possible. With his mouth agape, he scrammed towards me again, only to be knocked out by a single flick to the forehead by Kaz. "Smart move," he said, shaking his head. "At least they aren't nearly as strong as the fully transformed ones I came across earlier. Looks like you interrupted the process." "Did you kill him?" I asked, concerned at the prospect. 90% chance I didn't, but what the hell are you doing? I told you the plan, no detours." I gestured around the room. "We gotta save him." "How?" Kaz asked. "You want to march them all out into the hallways single file and just walk him out? What are you going to do if we come across another creature or another freak? You think I'm going to be able to protect them all?" "I'm not asking you to. I'm just..." I sighed in frustration because I knew he was right. Am I just selfish? I thought. I know there's no way we can save all of them, so why the hell am I forcing it? Why am I risking our only shot at getting out of here? Just to make myself feel better? It was a rather annoying predicament. People always die, don't they? Not everything can be helped. But then there was something to consider. Could we really allow the kids to become possessed? Or was it better to commit the unthinkable right then and there? Maybe it wasn't so unthinkable, given the circumstances. But were there really fates worse than death? "I'm leaving in 10 seconds, Kaz said. "I'll help you out, but not if it's going to get me killed in the process." There was no time to balance the ethics here. Guess you can't save everybody, I thought. I got up, preparing to leave, when I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. "Cop dude, is that you?" That kid. I'd forgotten about him. The kid I'd encountered earlier. I turned, seeing him tied up in the back of the room. There were tears streaming down his face, and his nostrils were spewing snot. An unsightly child, no doubt about it. "Oh, come on," Kaz said. "Don't tell me you know him." I took a deep exhale. Barely. But barely was enough. Maybe I couldn't save them all, but I could at least save one. I darted to the back of the room, untied the kid, and began dragging him towards the door, still averting my eyes from the glow. "Hopefully that wasn't a mistake," Kaz said, preparing to step out of the room. But before I could offer any words of reassurance, I could feel my feet sink into the floor, and then a pounding headache. Oh, great. The woman I'd knocked out moments prior was standing back up, her eyes glowing a menacing violet.
"You interrupted me. What's wrong with you?"
She extended a finger, and I was inexplicably launched into a wall. Kaz tried rushing her, but was buried into the ceiling. "Crap!" he grunted out. Damn Esper!"
"Esper,"
she laughed.
"you've got it all wrong."
She formed a fist, and I could see Kaz's torso being punctured by a seemingly invisible force. Another one of his hearts began floating out of the wound before being crushed in the air. "Damn it!" he shouted.
"Espers don't exist,"
the woman continued.
"I'm controlling entities beyond your comprehension. Beings that have been in this room all along, waiting for my command. Your brains have filtered them out in an attempt to keep you sane. Good for you."
All of a sudden, I could feel an invisible hand that was simultaneously rough and slimy, firmly grasping my neck, beginning to choke the life out of me. The woman then pointed at Kaz.
"I'll have to deal with this one later. His will seems rather hard to break. One of the strong. But you,
She turned to me.
you're nothing. The most glory you can hope to glean out of this world is existing as a disposable soldier in the Messiah's Legion. Just accept it."
I felt my body get cranked to the side. I knew it was coming, so I closed my eyes. She simply laughed at this.
Pathetic.
I could feel another hand forcing my eyelids open, exposing me to whatever obscure force was waiting in front of me. And as expected, I couldn't begin to understand what I was looking at. The strange purple overwhelmed my field of vision, but it wasn't only an external stimulus. The light seeped deep into my senses, and into what I assumed to be my soul itself. I could feel it gnawing away at my lucidity, my humanity, my own sense of self. The light in front of me began to morph, showing me scenes of an utterly inconceivable nature. Maybe it was another planet, another realm, another level of consciousness entirely. Beings that didn't coincide with the current plane of existence. Colors that I'd never seen before, nearly tearing my brain apart at the very implication of their existence. Eventually, an otherworldly appendage reached out to me, beckoning for me to follow. At the moment, I really did want to. It was something that seemed utterly out of my control. However, I was still clinging onto my own reality, forcing a motivating mantra to reverberate throughout my mind. 3 simple words. The strong survive. I'm not entirely sure what I was doing at that moment. Perhaps my will was functioning implicitly, without my brain really understanding what was happening. In any case, The enigmatic beings in front of me began dissolving back into the uniform light, and I was gaining back some control of my own consciousness. And that's when I told myself something that broke me out completely. Whatever's in front of me, it's just a damn light. When I came back to my senses, blood was dripping from my nose, and my head was pounding something fierce. But I was alive, and I was still myself. At that moment, I couldn't keep myself from letting out a boastful laugh. "Screw you! I did it!" The woman's face contorted into a furious glare. "You can die instead, then." It was a fatal mistake. In her rage, she'd focused all of her attention on me, leaving Kaz to his own devices. As he dropped down from the ceiling, he punched her head clean off, immediately grunting in pain afterwards. "Ugh, 2 hearts gone. What a crappy day." I expected him to be pissed at my rash decision when he turned to face me. But while he certainly wasn't happy about what had transpired, I could also sense a hint of something else in his eyes. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it might have been admiration. "Grab that damn kid and let's get out of here." For a moment, I was still hung up on the idea of saving the rest of them, but I tossed that aside when spider-like legs spurted out of the woman's severed neck and began crawling back to her body. We ran the hell out of there. Now that I knew I was more or less capable of withstanding the purple light, I was also confident in traversing through the smoke and right out the exit. This is gonna work, I thought. "Can I take my blindfold off now?" the kid asked me as we ran. I'd completely forgotten about it. Crap, yeah, take it off." He did so, but nearly screamed when he caught a glimpse of the bloodied Kaz. I covered his mouth before he could attract any unwanted attention. "That's Kaz," I told him. "Don't worry about it." We descended down the stairwell at the opposite end of the floor, hoping not to run into Brando again, or any other of Trent's insane messengers. We were about 40 feet away from the exit when we heard gunshots coming from the corridor up to the left of us. "Damn," Kaz said. "Is that bad news?" From what I'd seen, none of the messengers needed guns, and I assumed it wouldn't have been one of those creatures. By that logic, it must have been a friendly. Probably. But the question was, what were they firing at? We moved up a bit more before a figure stumbled into our vision. A familiar one. "Dex?" He turned his head around, eyes widening in surprise upon seeing me. "Pete, you're still alive? Nice. Just give me a second." He darted back down the corridor at a speed that took me by surprise. He was like a blur. A few minutes later, and after hearing what sounded like an intense struggle, he walked back out, accompanied by 2 more people. One was a woman with strawberry blonde hair tied back into a ponytail, wearing a torn-up jacket, khakis, and boots. One of her arms was mechanical, and portions of her neck also appeared to be robotic. Kaz seemed to recognize her. "Cecile?" he said, smiling. "They roped you up into this as well, huh?" He turned to me. "Another holy soldier. Class 0. Pretty tough. Also the one I don't mind looking at." She nodded, bent over in exhaustion while stretching out her bloody robot fingers. "Yeah, real happy to be here." She looked up. "What the hell happened to you? And where's that idiot Calhoun?" I didn't say anything. The last person was rather unassuming. A middle-aged man of average build tinkering around with a small spherical device in his hands. He glanced up at us. "I'm Joel. Good to meet you." And then he immediately went back to doing whatever he was before. Sure, it was strange behavior, but in the context of everything else that had happened, not so much. I was glad to see Dex, but it begged the question. How did he survive? What happened? He stepped forward, seemingly sensing what I was about to ask. They forced me to stare at the purple thing. Nearly got me as well. Then she saved me. He gestured towards Cecile. But, he continued, holding up his rifle, as you can see, I'm a bit wacky now. I didn't notice at first. His arm and the gun had become fused together, connecting at the right elbow in a disturbing amalgamation of metal, plastic, and flesh. I was too late, Cecile chimed in. They got the transformation started. I walked up towards him, seeing abnormally large veins running up the side of his neck to his chin. One of his irises had also turned into a dark red. Yeah, it's pretty freaky, whatever this is. I must not have been hiding my shock too well, because he chuckled. If you're feeling bad for me right now, I'll knock you out. I survived, didn't I? I'm stronger now as well. I knew he wasn't the type to fish for sympathy, no matter how distraught he was about his current situation. He wasn't going to show it, nor did he want anybody else to dwell on it, so I obliged him. How do you reload that thing? I asked. Don't need to, he replied, holding it up. It's weird. I can still feel my hand inside of this thing. The trigger's in there as well. Every time I pull it, it shoots. No jams. No need to reload. Insane rate of fire. Not quite sure what the bullets are made out of, though. I'm thinking they may be bone fragments. Well, that's something, I stammered out. We can continue this little reunion outside. Kaz spoke up. He turned to face Cecile. Judas is inbound, you know. I figured, she responded. But we can't leave. Kaz raised an eyebrow. Why not? They've set up the dome. We're trapped. Kaz was silent for a moment before staring at the ground. Damn, he spat in frustration. The dome? Like what, made out of glass or something? Just break through it, I said, confused at their sudden complacency with the situation. Cecile sighed. Look, the state has a lot of crap that you would never understand. Now, I don't know what this dome is made out of, but I can guarantee that none of us could even crack it. Except for Judas, that is. They're containing the whole area until he shows up, Kaz added. We're basically sitting ducks now. But they know you guys are in here, don't they? Kaz chuckled. What's a few expendable soldiers to the fate of the world at large? They always do this crap, finding excuses and covering it up. You ever wonder what happened to the airplane that went missing a few years ago? Judas is what happened. But, whatever. Nothing we can do about it. He was angry at first, but at that moment, he sounded more or less resigned to his fate. That's just like you, Kaz, Cecile said. Giving up so quickly. She tapped Joel on the shoulder. How's that thing coming along? She asked him. Yeah, progress is being made. Give it about 20 or 30, he responded. Cecile turned back to face us. We found him lurking around in the halls. Thought he was a teacher at first, but he wasn't freaking out or anything. Said he came here to pick something up. Wouldn't elaborate. Not sure where he came from or what he's all about. All I care about is that he can apparently get us out. Get us out? The hell's that supposed to mean? Kaz asked. It means what it means, Joel said. You say this Judas guy's gonna come and muck everything up? You say there's an unbreakable barrier outside? That the government's gone and left you for dead? He looked up for the first time in a while, grinning. How surprising. In that case, we just gotta find another way out, but don't worry about those logistics. Just keep me alive a bit longer, yeah? Kaz hardly reacted to the proposition. I didn't blame him. The whole thing sounded wonky at best. But again, stranger things. I should have stopped being surprised. Well, Kaz finally said after a few moments of contemplation, we got nothing better to do, I guess. Let's find somewhere to hide. No can do, Cecile said. Apparently we need to be outside when this happens. The doors to the football field are still open. That's where we're heading next." Kaz let out a sigh and a chuckle at the same time. Nothing's easy today, huh?" "Nothing's ever easy. Should have stayed in school, I guess," Cecile said. "By the way, who's the dang kid?" I looked over at him. It sounded like he was about to crap himself as he hugged the lockers while simultaneously trembling. "Oh, a straggler, but I'm not just going to leave him here," I responded. Cecile rolled her eyes before walking up to him. "You got a name, kid?" Harris," he stammered out. "Well, Harris, are you strong?" Probably not." Cecile just shook her head, laughing. "You remind me of my little brother. He's also a coward. But I'll get you out of here alive." She raised a fist and pointed it towards him. "But you'll have to promise me something as well. You may not be strong, but you're gonna have to try. Don't be an easy target, all right?" Still shaking, Harris lifted his fist and connected it with hers. "Yeah, she got too strong for her own good and gives terrible advice now," Kaz whispered to me. Afterwards, Cecile began heading towards the field entrance. The rest of us followed behind her, with Harris and Joel squished in between us, the latter still fiddling with the device. "Here," Dex said, placing his pistol in my hand. "You're looking a bit empty there. Not sure how much that'll help, though." I was a bit concerned about that as well. Still, it felt better having some kind of weapon in my hands. In retrospect, I should have picked up the bounty hunter's gun. Firing it once would have likely dislocated my arm, though. We made it to the field without much problem. We ran into a few creatures along the way, but they were taken care of rather easily. Once out onto the field, we looked up, seeing the octagonal patterned barrier above and around us. It was rather hard to see through, but a few things were for sure. It had become dark outside, and there were helicopters and vehicles surrounding the place. The area still within the barrier, but beyond the field, was also littered with corpses, both human and creature alike. But our biggest problem was standing right in front of us. An extremely tall man, probably eclipsing 8 feet. His hair was long and red, seemingly floating atop his oversized shoulders. The top half of his head was covered by black cloth, obscuring his eyes. The rest of his body seemed to be covered in black bandages, wrapped tight so that his hulking physique bulged through. He was also holding a long, thin sword that emanated the same red glow as his hair. "I have to say," he began speaking, in a calm but explicitly hostile tone, "that's a tough barrier you've set up here. You're trying to keep us in, are you?" He lifted his sword, pointing it directly at us. "A pointless effort. The Messiah's gonna burn this world to the ground and create a superior one from the ashes." Kaz let out a bored grunt, interrupting the sword man's spiel. "Holy hell, you people are lame. What's the point of any of this?" "Idiot," Cecile said under her breath. "Should have kept him talking. Buy us some time." The sword man let out a patronizing laugh. "Luckily, I'm the one you're dealing with. Unlike those savages, I don't get offended so easily. But you lot must be confident. Better for me. Come and give me some stimulation before you die." Thank you for making it this far. I hope you enjoyed the video. I just wanted to quickly let you know about a couple things I have going on. I have an Instagram where I post more personal things about who I am. It isn't just all creepy stuff. You can find me at Stories After Midnight. I also have a Twitter where I mainly retweet and like things I find interesting. The handle for that is in the description, but it is S_A_midnight. I should really find another one because that's hard to say. If you really like what I'm doing, consider joining the Midnighters. That's my growing community, where we hang out and have fun and talk about cats. You can find a link to our Discord in the description below. We'd love to see you there. Other than that, It'd make me happier than a cat on a table full of antique glassware. If you'd like the video, and consider sticking around for more. We'll see you in the next one.